Racist bullies thought she was just another girl, someone they could intimidate, someone who would stay quiet. But they had no idea who they were messing with. Her father wasn't just a rich man. He was the kind of man who made people disappear. By the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. Because in this world, some mistakes can't be undone. Before continuing this amazing story, let us know where are you watching from today. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Let's begin our story. The hallways of Ridgewood High were loud, crowded, and filled with the usual high school chaos. Lockers slamming, students laughing, teachers calling out warnings no one listened to. Ava Moretti walked through it all with her head held high, books clutched to her chest, trying to blend into the background. She had mastered the art of silence, never too loud, never too noticeable. It wasn't fear, it was control. The less attention she drew, the fewer questions people asked. But some people noticed her anyway. "Hey, Black Barbie!" a voice sneered behind her. She stopped. Slowly, she turned, already knowing who it was. Chad Lawson, the golden-haired prince of Ridgewood High. The kind of rich kid who thought the world bent at his feet because his daddy was a judge. His boys, Travis, Ethan, Zach, and Ryan, stood around him like a pack of wolves, feeding off his arrogance. Ava exhaled sharply, gripping her books a little tighter. "What do you want, Chad?" Chad grinned, stepping closer. "Just being friendly. We don't get a lot of your kind around here." Her jaw tightened. "My kind?" Travis snickered. "Yeah, you know," imports Ethan added. "Don't take it the wrong way, sweetheart. We just think it's funny. You trying to fit in, walking around like you belong." Ava's pulse pounded in her ears. Not today, not here, not now. She glanced around. The hallway was full, but no one was watching. No one ever did. She forced herself to smile. "Oh, I belong just fine. But if you five don't start moving, I'm gonna make you regret standing here." The laughter stopped. For a moment, Chad looked thrown off. Then, slowly, he smirked. "Oh, feisty, I like that." She turned to leave. That's when he grabbed her wrist. It was a mistake. A bad one. Ava moved fast. Too fast. She twisted her arm free, grabbed Chad's wrist, and before he knew what was happening, his body was flipped onto the cold, hard floor. The air left his lungs in a sharp gasp. The entire hallway went silent. Ava didn't even look at him. She just picked up her books and walked away. Behind her, Chad groaned, struggling to get up. His boys stared, unsure whether to help him or laugh. And then, in a voice too quiet to be anything but dangerous, Chad said, "She has no idea what she just did." He wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not ever. Ava had made a mistake. She had picked a fight. And she had no idea what her father was about to do because of it. Ava Moretti knew the rules. She had spent her entire life following them, walking the fine line between who she was and who she could never be in public. Rule number 1, never stand out. Rule number 2, never lose control. Rule number 3, never ever let anyone know who her father was. She had just broken all 3. The weight of what she had done sat heavy on her chest as she moved through the rest of the school day. She kept her expression neutral, her shoulders squared, but inside, her thoughts raced. Had she gone too far? Probably. But Chad had grabbed her. No one touched her. Ava sighed, shutting her locker at the end of the day. She didn't regret standing up for herself. But she knew what guys like Chad were like. Entitled, cruel, the kind of people who believed the world owed them something, just for existing. They didn't let things go. She could feel eyes on her as she walked to the school exit. Whispers, curious glances. People had seen what happened. People were talking. Her best friend, Jasmine Carter, was waiting by the school gates, arms crossed, lips pressed into a firm line. Jasmine shook her head as Ava approached. "Girl, I don't know whether to be impressed or scared for you," Ava sighed. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Jasmine gave her a look. "Yeah, well, it did. And now Chad is out for blood. You know how guys like him get." Ava knew. Oh, she knew. They reached Jasmine's car, an old blue Honda that rattled when the engine started. Ava got in, staring out the window as Jasmine pulled out of the parking lot. "You should have let me drive you," Ava muttered. Jasmine scoffed. "What? And let you roll up in that scary-ass black SUV with your bodyguards lurking? No thanks. I like my car bullet-free." Ava didn't respond. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a joke. Her father didn't take chances. She had always been watched. Jasmine glanced at her. "You didn't tell him, did you?" Ava shook her head. "Number and you won't either." Silence stretched between them. Ava could feel the weight of Jasmine's stare. "Ava, if things get worse, you need to—" "I won't," Ava cut in. "You don't get it, Jazz. If I tell him, there's no coming back from it. He won't talk to the school. He won't call their parents. He'll handle it his way." Jasmine looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, she said, "Maybe that's exactly what they deserve." Ava swallowed hard and looked away. Because the worst part, she agreed. Meanwhile, across town, in a dimly lit, heavily guarded mansion, Vincent Moretti sat at his desk, sipping whiskey, listening to the sound of rain against his windows. His phone sat on the polished wood, silent. His daughter hadn't called him today. She always called. His fingers tapped against the glass. A slow, measured rhythm. Something was wrong, and Vincent Moretti didn't like not knowing. Ava sat in her room, the dim glow of her bedside lamp casting long shadows across the walls. She had barely touched her dinner, pushing food around her plate while her mind ran circles around the same thought. What was Chad going to do next? Her father's house was a fortress. The Moretti estate sat on the edge of town, surrounded by high stone walls, monitored by cameras, and patrolled by men who didn't ask questions. Her father's men, his soldiers. She was safe here, but the thing about safety? It was an illusion. Ava reached for her phone, hesitated, then unlocked it. A message from Jasmine flashed on the screen. Jasmine. "Chad's talking. Said you embarrassed him, said you're gonna pay." Ava exhaled sharply. Of course he was. Chad wasn't just cruel. He was entitled. And entitled men didn't handle humiliation well. Especially not from someone like her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could text back. She could tell Jasmine not to worry. She could tell her she had this under control. But did she? She set the phone down instead. She needed to think. Across town, at the Silver Oak Country Club, Chad Lawson was seething. He sat in the dimly lit lounge, a glass of whiskey in his hand, legs spread in a posture of dominance. His father had gotten him a fake ID years ago. Privilege had its perks. The four other boys sat around him, quieter than usual. They knew better than to speak when Chad was like this. Travis finally broke the silence. "Man, I still can't believe she did that to you." Chad clenched his jaw. "She thinks she's untouchable." He exhaled, shaking his head. "She's gonna learn." Zach shifted in his seat. "Dude, her family's kinda loaded, right?" Ethan scoffed. "So? My family's loaded too. Doesn't mean we let some nobody walk all over us." Ryan hesitated. "I don't know, man. Maybe we just let it go." Chad's gaze snapped to him, cold and sharp. Ryan immediately looked down. No one questioned Chad. Chad took a slow sip of his drink. He let the fire burn in his chest, let it fuel him. Then he smirked. "I'm gonna ruin her." The others exchanged looks. "How?" Travis asked. Chad leaned forward, voice dripping with quiet malice. "We show her what happens when people like her forget their place." Silence. Then Ethan grinned. Yeah, man, let's do it. Ryan swallowed hard. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. At that exact moment, in his study, Vincent Moretti sat in his leather chair, a cigarette burning between his fingers. His phone was still silent. His instincts were screaming. His daughter was hiding something. Vincent exhaled slowly, the smoke curling in the air. He reached for his other phone, the untraceable one. With one press of a button, the call connected. A deep voice answered. "Yes, boss?" Vincent took a drag of his cigarette, then exhaled. "Watch her." A pause. Then, "Understood." Vincent hung up. His daughter could lie to him all she wanted. But no one touched what was his. The next morning, Ava felt the shift the moment she walked into Ridgewood High. It was subtle but undeniable, the way people looked at her. Some with curiosity, some with amusement, some with something darker. Whispers followed her down the hallway, hushed voices pressing against her skin like invisible hands. She ignored them, keeping her head high, her face neutral. She had learned long ago how to walk through fire without letting it burn her. Then she saw them. Chad, Travis, Ethan, Zach, Ryan. They stood by the lockers like they owned the place, laughing, nudging each other, radiating arrogance. Chad caught her eyes and smirked. Ava didn't flinch. She refused to give him the satisfaction. She turned the corner and nearly collided with Jasmine. Jasmine grabbed her arm. "You saw it, right?" Ava frowned. "Saw what?" Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. "Shit. Come with me." She pulled Ava toward an empty classroom, shutting the door behind them. Then she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. Ava's stomach dropped. It was a photo, a badly edited, humiliating photo of her. Her face had been photoshopped onto some girl in a degrading, sexualized position. The caption underneath was worse. "This is how black girls get in." Ava felt cold all over. Her fingers clenched into fists. "Who?" Jasmine gave her a look. "Who do you think?" Ava closed her eyes for a second, inhaled through her nose. Calm, control. "Don't let them win." Jasmine's voice was softer now. "It's everywhere. Group chats, socials. People are reposting it." Ava opened her eyes. Her voice was steady, too steady. "It's not real." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter. People will still believe it." Ava exhaled. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained unreadable. She had two choices: ignore it and let them think they won, or fight back. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Never let a man take something from you without making him bleed for it." She wasn't going to bleed. But Chad Lawson was about to. Meanwhile, Vincent Moretti sat at his desk, a single photograph in his hand. It had been slid under his office door that morning. Avenue, his Ava, defiled, humiliated. A lie. Vincent didn't breathe. He didn't move. His entire body was coiled, a silent, simmering thing. Not anger, not yet. Something deeper, something worse. The door creaked open. Luca, his right-hand man, stepped inside. He took one look at Vincent's face and stilled. "Boss?" Vincent's fingers curled around the edges of the photo, slowly, carefully. Then, in a voice as quiet as death itself, he said, "Find out who did this." Luca's throat bobbed. "And when we do," Vincent looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "Bring them to me." Ava didn't go to class, not yet. She stood in the empty hallway outside the girls' restroom, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The photo, the caption, the whispers. She should have seen this coming. Chad wasn't the kind of guy who handled embarrassment well. He wasn't going to hit her back. He was going to break her in a way that left no bruises but still made her bleed. Jasmine leaned against the wall beside her, arms crossed. "Tell me what we're doing, Ava. Because I swear, if you say ignore it, I might slap you myself. Ava's jaw tightened. I'm not ignoring it. Good, because Chad needs to pay. Ava inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Number Chad needs to lose. Jasmine frowned. Isn't that the same thing? Ava shook her head. Not yet. Because revenge wasn't just about hitting back. It was about taking control. And right now, Chad thought he was in control. He wasn't, not for long. She exhaled and straightened. Let's go. Where? Ava started walking. To class. Jasmine stared after her. Wait, you're just gonna act like nothing happened? Ava glanced back. Number, I'm gonna make Chad think he didn't hit me hard enough. And then, she was going to destroy him. Meanwhile, Luca stood in front of Vincent Moretti's desk, his expression unreadable. He had been working for the Moretti family for over 15 years. He had seen Vincent in a lot of moods, cold, quiet, deadly. But this was different. Vincent was completely still. His fingers rested against the desk, the only sign of movement the slow tapping of his thumb against the polished wood. A quiet countdown to something awful. Luca cleared his throat. We found them. Vincent's thumb stilled. Names. Luca's voice was careful. Chad Lawson, Travis Monroe, Ethan Davis, Zach Harris, Ryan Cole. Vincent leaned back, his expression unreadable. Lawson. Luca hesitated. His father is a judge. Vincent smiled. It was not a kind smile. Then he should know, Vincent murmured, that the law won't protect his son from me. Luca didn't move, because he knew, when Vincent Moretti made a decision, there was no stopping what came next. Vincent exhaled slowly, then picked up the photo of Ava again. He studied it for a long moment, as if memorizing every insult, every piece of filth Chad had tried to stain his daughter with. And then, with quiet finality, he set the photo down. His voice was calm when he spoke. Make the boy suffer. The school hallways weren't as loud today. Not because people weren't talking, they were. But it was different now. The whispers weren't amused anymore. They were waiting to see if Ava Moretti would break. She didn't. She walked through Ridgewood High like nothing had happened. Like Chad hadn't tried to humiliate her. Like his little stunt meant nothing. And that was what made it worse for him. Chad Lawson wasn't laughing anymore. He sat in the cafeteria, his tray untouched, fists clenched under the table as his boys tried to distract him with jokes. But he wasn't listening. Because across the room, Ava was fine. She was sitting with Jasmine, eating, talking, acting like he didn't even exist, like he hadn't just ruined her. Travis nudged him. Dude, she's faking it, Ethan scoffed. Yeah, she's probably crying in the bathroom between classes. Ryan was quiet. He had been quiet ever since Chad started this whole thing. Chad took a slow breath, forcing himself to relax. She'll crack. She already has, Travis muttered. She just doesn't want people to see it, Chad exhaled. Good, but something felt off. Because if Ava was hurting, she should have looked like it. Instead, she looked calm. Too calm. Like she was waiting. Chad shook the thought away. It didn't matter. He had won. He had put her in her place. This was over, right? That night. Luca stepped out of the black SUV, his boots crunching against the gravel of a quiet suburban street. A few houses down, the Lawson residence stood in the soft glow of porch lights, neat and completely unprotected. Luca pulled his coat tighter against the cold, then checked his watch. 9:17 p.m. showtime. A figure stepped up beside him. Marco. Another of Vincent's men, younger, eager, but careful. You sure about this? Marco murmured. Luca didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward the house. Marco sighed, pulling out his phone. He pressed a button. And just like that, the entire Lawson house went dark. Lights off, security system down, phone lines cut. A simple message from Vincent Moretti himself. No one touches his blood and walks away. Chad was in his room, scrolling through his phone when everything shut off. He blinked, then frowned. The lamp beside his bed? Dead. The hallway light? Nothing. His phone? Still working, but no signal. A strange creeping feeling slid up his spine. Then, from outside, a single, heavy knock on the front door. Chad froze. His gut twisted. Some deep, primal part of him screaming, "Don't open it." But then his dad's voice rang out from downstairs. "Who the hell is knocking at this hour?" Chad swallowed. Then, before he even realized he was moving, he was on his feet, creeping toward the top of the stairs. The front door swung open, and Chad's father, Judge William Lawson, took a single step back. Because standing there, dressed in all black, eyes dark and unreadable, was Vincent Moretti. The moment Vincent Moretti stepped inside the Lawson home, the air changed. Judge William Lawson stiffened, his grip tightening on the doorknob. He was a man used to power, used to being the one people feared. But this was different, because this was not someone you called the cops on. Vincent's presence was quiet, but suffocating, like the moment before a gun goes off. He took a slow step forward, his black coat moving like a shadow around him. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't even glance at Chad, who stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Instead, he placed a single black envelope on the hallway table. William swallowed. His voice was even, but there was an edge to it. "What the hell is this?" Vincent finally looked at him. A slow, deliberate gaze, the kind that made a man feel exposed. "A courtesy," Vincent murmured. His voice was smooth, calm, too calm. "Something I don't usually extend." Chad felt like he couldn't breathe. His fingers gripped the banister so hard they hurt. Why was Ava's father here? William glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. "If this is some kind of threat..." "It's not a threat," Vincent interrupted, his tone still dangerously polite. He leaned in slightly. "It's a warning." Silence. Vincent straightened his sleeves, then took a slow step back toward the door. "Consider this my way of keeping things clean," he added, like he was talking about business. Like this was nothing more than a formality. Then he glanced up, right at Chad, and in that single moment, without raising his voice, without taking a single step toward him, Vincent Moretti ruined Chad Lawson. Because his gaze told him everything. "I know, I see you. You are nothing," Chad swallowed, his entire body locking up. And then, just like that, Vincent turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the night like a ghost. The judge exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. Then, as if remembering something, he snatched the envelope off the table and tore it open. His eyes scanned the contents, and his face drained of all color. Chad took a shaky step down the stairs. "Dad?" His father didn't respond. He just gripped the letter, his jaw tight, and muttered a single sentence that made Chad's stomach drop. "You stupid, stupid boy." Meanwhile, Ava was sitting on her bed when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. Her heart skipped. She hesitated, then answered. She didn't speak. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then a familiar, low voice. "It's done." Ava exhaled. Her grip on the phone tightened. "He won't come near me again?" A pause. Then a quiet chuckle. "No, princess," her father murmured. "He won't." Then the line went dead. Ava stared at the phone in her hand. She knew what her father was capable of. But this? This wasn't over, not yet. Because Chad wasn't just a coward. He was stupid. And stupid men don't know when to stay down. Chad Lawson sat in his bedroom, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. He had been in fights before. He had pissed off teachers, broken rules, gotten away with things that should have landed him in real trouble. But this was different. His father had barely spoken to him since Vincent Moretti left their house. Just one glance at that letter, and the judge, William Goddamn Lawson, had turned pale. Chad didn't even know what was in it. He just knew that whatever Moretti had on his family, it was enough to shake his father to the core. For the first time in his life, Chad felt something he didn't know how to handle. Fear. Real, deep, suffocating fear. His hands shook as he unlocked his phone. He tapped on Travis's name. The call rang. Once, twice. Then went straight to voicemail. He cursed under his breath. He tried Ethan. Same thing. Zach, Ryan. Nothing. One by one, his boys were ghosting him. Because they knew. They had seen it too. Ava Moretti wasn't just some black girl they could push around. She was untouchable, and Chad had touched her. Meanwhile, Ava sat on the hood of Jasmine's car, staring out at the empty parking lot behind the gas station. Jasmine lit a cigarette, exhaling sharply. So, are you going to tell me what the hell happened? Or am I supposed to guess? Ava didn't respond. Jasmine gave her a look. Come on, Ava. One day, the whole school is laughing at you. The next, Chad looks like he saw a ghost and no one will even say your name. She took another drag. What did you do? Ava exhaled slowly. I didn't do anything, Jasmine snorted. Bullshit. Ava hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She opened her messages, scrolled down, and tapped on the unknown number. Jasmine leaned in. Who's that? Ava turned the screen toward her. Jasmine squinted at the single, unread message. He got the message. He won't bother you again. A slow chill ran down Jasmine's spine. She swallowed. Ava. Ava locked her phone. I told you I didn't do anything. But Jasmine could see it now, the way Ava's fingers curled just slightly. Not in fear, in control. Because for the first time in a long time, Ava Moretti wasn't being pushed around. She was the one holding the leash. But it wasn't over yet. Chad sat in the back of his father's car, watching the city lights blur past. They weren't going home. His father hadn't said a word since they left the house, just barked out a single order. Get in the car. Chad clenched his jaw. He wanted to ask where they were going, but something told him he didn't want the answer. The car slowed, turned a corner, and then Chad felt his stomach drop. Because he recognized where they were. Downtown, the Moretti-owned district. His father pulled up in front of a quiet, upscale restaurant, Moretti's restaurant. Then he turned to Chad, eyes cold and unreadable. Get out! Chad swallowed. Dad! His father's hand snapped out, grabbing his wrist hard. You don't speak, he said quietly. You don't argue. You don't breathe wrong. You sit down and you listen. Because this? His grip tightened. This is the only reason you're still alive. Chad's blood turned to ice. He didn't say another word. Because for the first time, he realized something. This wasn't about teaching him a lesson. This was about survival. And as he stepped out of the car, walking toward that restaurant, he understood. He had never been the predator. He had always been the prey. Inside the dimly lit restaurant, the scent of fine food mixed with the heavy weight of silence. Chad's steps echoed through the hallway as he followed his father toward a private dining room in the back. The tension in the air was thick, like they were entering a place where even breathing wrong could cost them. Chad couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something fundamental. His father, the man who controlled the town with an iron fist, was no longer the one calling the shots. Vincent Moretti was. They entered the room, and immediately, Chad's eyes locked onto the figure sitting at the far end of the long, sleek table. Vincent Moretti, in his customary black suit, sat relaxed, his fingers steepled before him. He looked the same as ever, composed, confident, untouchable. But Chad knew better now. There was something different about him, something darker. Behind Vincent, Luca stood at attention, arms crossed, as if the very air around him was charged with electricity. Chad swallowed, his throat dry. "Sit," Vincent's voice rang out, smooth and unbothered, yet carrying the weight of someone who never had to repeat himself. Chad hesitated for a moment, but his father's hand on his back urged him forward. He slid into the chair across from Vincent, his back straight, fighting to keep the fear from showing. Vincent smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "So, Chad, we meet at last." Chad's stomach twisted. "What do you want from me?" Vincent leaned forward slightly. "You know, I was hoping you'd ask that." His voice was steady, deliberate. "What I want, Chad, is for you to understand something." Chad stiffened. "What? That what you did to my daughter? The game you thought you were playing?" "It was never just a game." Vincent's eyes sharpened, cold as ice. "And you, my friend, just became a pawn." Chad's breath hitched. "I didn't." Vincent raised a hand. "No need to defend yourself. I don't need to hear your excuses. I need you to understand one thing. Actions have consequences." The room seemed to darken, the weight of his words sinking in. Chad's mind raced, his father's silence behind him, only amplifying the tension. "You want to make something of yourself in this world, Chad?" Vincent continued, his voice smooth but cutting. "You don't pick on people who can't fight back. You don't drag their names through the mud just because you think you can get away with it." Chad wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Vincent's eyes narrowed, his gaze locking onto Chad's. "Your father, Judge Lawson, understands this very well. He doesn't control everything here, Chad. Not anymore." Chad's world tilted, the truth slamming into him like a freight train. He glanced at his father, who sat silent, his expression unreadable. Vincent smiled again, this time with a bit more amusement. "And I have a feeling you're starting to realize how deep this goes." Meanwhile, Ava had never felt more alive. Since the night Vincent had made his move, she had been riding a strange wave of quiet confidence. It wasn't just because her father had handled things. It was because she wasn't afraid anymore. She had walked into school this morning with her head high, not even a flicker of doubt in her stride. The rumors? The photo? Gone. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Jasmine. "You good?" Ava smiled slightly as she typed back, "Better than ever." She slid her phone back into her pocket and looked around. The once hostile glances from other students had softened. She could see it now, the way people watched her with curiosity rather than judgment. She was untouchable. But there was something else too, something darker. Her father's influence was like a shadow over her life, invisible but ever present. She had never felt the full weight of it until now, and she had to admit, it scared her. Not because she wasn't proud of who her father was, but because she wasn't sure she could control the consequences of it. Back at the Lawson house, the drive home was eerily quiet. Chad's father hadn't spoken a word since they left Vincent's restaurant. The car hummed along the road, headlights cutting through the darkness. Chad couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened, about how he had just sat there, completely powerless, while Vincent Moretti tore through his life like it was nothing. His father's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "You don't mess with people like Vincent Moretti." Chad wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words stuck in his throat. "You think because you've got a name and a family with influence, you're untouchable? Let me tell you something, boy." His father's voice hardened. "You never cross that line. Because people like Vincent, they'll make you regret it." Chad swallowed. "I didn't mean to." I don't care what you meant. The car turned into their driveway. Chad felt the cold bite of his father's words, and for the first time in his life, he realized just how much power Vincent Moretti had, and just how little he had in comparison. The days after the meeting with Vincent Moretti felt like walking through a haze. Chad couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him had shifted in ways he couldn't comprehend. It was like stepping into a new world, one where he was no longer the one in control. The whispers followed him everywhere. His friends, his classmates. They all acted like he was invisible, except for one person, Avenue. She was there every day, walking through the halls of Ridgewood High like she was untouchable. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation in her movements. She held her head high, the weight of her father's presence wrapped around her like an invisible cloak. Chad watched her from across the school, from the back of classrooms, from the cafeteria. There was something about the way she carried herself now, something that made him feel small, like she was too powerful to touch. William Lawson sat at his desk, his fingers tapping steadily on the polished wood. His office was lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. He hadn't spoken to Chad since the night of the meeting with Vincent. The silence between them felt heavy, thick. Chad stood at the door, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, trying to avoid his father's gaze. "Sit," his father's voice finally broke the silence. Chad hesitated but obeyed, sliding into the chair across from his father. William didn't look up from the papers on his desk. His voice was low, controlled. "You think I didn't notice the way you've been walking around here? Like you're ready to crawl back into your little world." Chad didn't answer. "You think because Vincent Moretti played this game with you that you're somehow free of the consequences?" William continued, his voice hardening. "You made a mistake, Chad. A big one. And now, you've got to live with it." Chad's jaw clenched. "What do you want me to do?" William's eyes finally lifted to meet Chad's. "You need to fix it. And you don't fix it by running away or pretending like nothing happened. You fix it by facing him." Chad blinked. "Vincent Moretti?" William nodded. "Yes, you go to him, face to face, and you apologize. You make it clear that you know exactly what you did, and you're willing to make it right. If you don't, I'll leave you to your fate, and that fate doesn't look good." Chad's heart skipped. "You want me to go to him?" "Yes." William's voice was firm. "You owe him that much at least." Chad wanted to argue, wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, but he knew better than to defy his father. His father's words held the weight of years of control, years of silence that could shatter him in a single moment. Vincent Moretti's mansion loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. Chad's car crawled up the long driveway, the tires crunching against the gravel. He felt a sickening knot twist in his stomach, but he had no choice. The time had come. He parked the car and stepped out, his legs unsteady beneath him. The mansion looked even more intimidating up close, massive, cold, and silent. A single guard stood at the door, watching Chad approach with careful eyes. Chad swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. "Mr. Lawson," the guard said, his voice low and neutral. Chad barely nodded, his hands trembling as he made his way into the mansion. Vincent was waiting for him in the study, the same chair he had been sitting in the night Chad's world had crumbled. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the floor. Vincent didn't stand when Chad entered. He just gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." Chad's breath caught as he made his way to the chair. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry. He had rehearsed the words in his mind 1,000 times. But now that he was here, facing Vincent Moretti, the words felt meaningless. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Vincent watched him silently, eyes calculating, waiting for Chad to find his voice. Finally, Chad spoke, his voice rough. I'm sorry for what I did, for what happened to your daughter. Vincent didn't blink. Go on. I didn't know who she was. I thought she was just some girl I could push around, but she's not. I see that now. Chad's voice faltered. I'm sorry, I was wrong. There was a long silence. Chad's heart hammered in his chest as he waited for Vincent to respond. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You know, Chad, most people don't admit when they're wrong, but there's something about you. Something I didn't expect. Chad swallowed. I don't know what you mean. Vincent smiled, a slow, cold smile that sent a shiver down Chad's spine. I mean, you're still breathing, and that's the first step. Chad's brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means, Chad, you're not out of this yet. Vincent's voice was soft, dangerous, like a predator toying with its prey. But you're on the right path. Apologies are the start, but there's a long way to go before this is really over. Chad didn't know what that meant, but the weight of those words sank deep into him. He had no idea what was coming next. All he knew was that this apology wasn't the end of the line. It was just the beginning of something much worse. Chad is learning the price of his actions, but is it enough to change the inevitable? Will he survive the consequences of crossing Vincent Moretti? The morning after Chad's meeting with Vincent Moretti, Ridgewood High felt like a different world. Chad moved through the halls like a ghost. His presence barely noticed by anyone. The usual faces, his friends, the other students, passed him by, their eyes avoiding his as if he didn't exist. The air around him was thick, heavy with a silence he couldn't break through. Ava, however, was everywhere. She moved through the school with an effortless grace, like she owned the place. The whispers that followed her now weren't the taunts and insults from before. Now, people watched her in awe. Chad couldn't understand it. The girl he had tormented, the one he thought was easy prey, she was untouchable. It was almost as if she had become something more than human. Vincent Moretti sat at his desk, eyes scanning a stack of papers, his fingers lightly tapping against the wooden surface. The room was quiet. The only sound, the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Come in. Luca entered, his expression unreadable, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his thoughts. What is it? Vincent asked, not looking up from his papers. Luca hesitated, then cleared his throat. We've been getting some unwanted attention. Vincent raised an eyebrow. From whom? The Lawsons. Judge Lawson, to be specific. Vincent's eyes flicked up, narrowing slightly. And? They've been asking questions about you, about Ava. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. What do they want? Luca shook his head. I'm not sure, but it's clear they're getting desperate. They know there's more at play here, and they're trying to find out just how deep this goes. Vincent smiled, a slow, calculating grin. Let them. It's cute when people think they can dig their way out of a hole they've dug themselves into. Luca said nothing, waiting for Vincent's next move. Vincent stood, walking to the window, his gaze sweeping over the city. The Lawsons are out of their depth. They'll come crawling to me when they realize they're in over their heads. I'm just waiting for the moment when they can't deny it anymore. Luca didn't respond, but he could feel the weight of Vincent's words hanging in the air. The storm was coming, and the Lawsons wouldn't see it until it was too late. Ava stood at her locker, her fingers moving with practiced ease as she retrieved the books she needed for her next class. She could feel eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. It was clear now. She had become something else, something people were afraid to challenge. She had started to understand the power her father wielded, not just in the shadows, but in plain sight. It wasn't just about violence or control. It was about the fear he instilled in people, the idea that anyone who crossed him would never escape the consequences. And Ava, she was learning how to use that fear to her advantage. But there was still a part of her that felt conflicted. She didn't want to be known as the daughter of a mafia boss. She didn't want the weight of his world on her shoulders. But every time she tried to push it away, she realized that this was her world now. "Hey!" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Ava turned to find Jasmine standing next to her, her expression curious but guarded. "What's up?" Ava asked, locking her locker and turning to face her friend. "I don't know." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. "You've changed, Ava. You know that, right?" Ava blinked, unsure of what Jasmine meant. "Changed how?" Jasmine hesitated before answering. "You've got this presence, like you're untouchable, like no one can mess with you anymore. It's kind of scary." Ava frowned. She didn't know how to explain it. "I'm just standing up for myself now, that's all." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Standing up for yourself is one thing, but whatever's going on with you lately, it's different. It's like you've stepped into something bigger than you realize." Ava opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. She didn't know how to tell Jasmine about her father's world, about the unspoken rules and the dangers lurking just beneath the surface. "I'm fine," Ava said quietly. I'm learning how to deal with it all. You'll see. I'll be okay." Jasmine watched her for a moment before nodding slowly. "I hope so, Ava. Just don't get lost in whatever this is." Ava forced a smile, but deep down, she knew Jasmine was right. The power she had gained, the fear she commanded, it was intoxicating, and she wasn't sure if she could stop it from consuming her. Chad stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He had done what his father asked of him. He had apologized to Vincent Moretti, and in return, he had been given another chance. But now, standing in front of the mirror, Chad wasn't sure what to do with that second chance. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to be anymore. He had crossed a line he couldn't come back from, and now Ava Moretti wasn't just a girl he'd bullied. She was a force he couldn't reckon with. The weight of his father's expectations crushed him. The Lawsons had always been the powerful family, the ones who controlled everything in Ridgewood. But now, it felt like their grip was slipping, like they were being outplayed by the Morettis. He could feel it in his bones. The game was changing, and the Lawsons were losing. He closed his eyes, trying to push away the doubt and fear. But it was there, gnawing at him, eating away at his confidence. And he knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. This was just the beginning of something much darker. The weeks that followed Vincent Moretti's meeting with Chad passed in a blur of tension. The air in Ridgewood seemed thicker, the undercurrents of fear and power growing stronger with each passing day. Chad's once certain world was unraveling, and every step he took felt like he was being pulled deeper into a storm he couldn't control. His father's warnings echoed in his mind. "You don't mess with people like Vincent Moretti." But it wasn't just Vincent anymore. It was Ava. The girl, who had once been the object of his cruelty, had become something he couldn't understand. Ava's presence in the school had changed everything. Students no longer looked at her with pity or disdain. They looked at her with fear and respect. The whispers had turned into reverence. It was as though she had somehow stepped into a world where no one dared to challenge her. Chad couldn't escape the reality that he was a part of that world now, whether he liked it or not. The mansion stood silent as Vincent sat in his study, the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. His eyes, as always, were sharp, calculating, an ever-watchful predator. Luca entered, his expression grim. "Anything new?" Vincent asked, his voice low but expectant. Luca nodded. "The Lawsons are starting to make moves. They're looking into everything, Vincent. Into Ava's involvement with the school, into your control over this town. They're getting desperate." Vincent's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Let them. They think they can outplay me. It's almost cute." "But the pressure's building," Luca continued. "They're reaching out to their contacts. If they get too close—" "I'll handle it," Vincent interrupted smoothly. "When people try to dig into your business, they forget one crucial thing. They're digging their own graves." Luca didn't speak, knowing better than to argue. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied Luca. "Make sure Ava stays out of this. She doesn't need to know about the danger lurking. Let the Lawsons dig their own hole, but I'll decide when to bury them." Luca nodded, his expression hardening. "Understood." Ava stood at her locker, the weight of the stairs on her back never quite fading. It was like 1,000 eyes were trained on her every move, waiting for her to slip, to make a mistake. But she didn't feel scared anymore. She felt alive. Ava had come into her power slowly. At first, not even recognizing it, but now she was learning to embrace it. She was no longer the girl people underestimated. She was the girl who owned every room she walked into, and that power made her dangerous. But there was still a piece of her that couldn't let go of the past. She hadn't forgotten the torment she'd endured at the hands of Chad and his friends. The way they had treated her, the things they had said. It was hard to ignore, but she had learned something during these past few weeks. She didn't need to let her father's world consume her. She didn't need to become the person people thought she was. She could carve her own path, even in a world that was so deeply entrenched in fear and violence. As she closed her locker, she noticed a familiar face. Chad was standing near the entrance of the hallway, his eyes locked on hers. Ava's heart skipped, but she didn't flinch. She simply walked toward him, her footsteps slow, deliberate. Chad didn't speak at first. His eyes were tense, like he was struggling with the words he wanted to say. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "I know you're angry with me," Chad said, his voice raw with something that sounded like guilt. "What I did, I was an idiot. I don't even know what I was thinking." Ava stared at him for a moment, her arms crossed. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel. She wanted to be angry, to make him feel every ounce of the hurt he had caused. But there was something else, something darker, stirring inside her. "You think an apology makes it okay?" Ava's voice was low, measured. Chad's eyes softened. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." Ava tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. "Sorry doesn't fix everything. It doesn't fix what you did to me, to my friends, to the people who care about me. It doesn't fix the way you made me feel less than." Chad's face crumpled with the weight of her words. "I don't know how to fix that. I don't even know if I can." Ava took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "You can't, not now, not after everything." There was a long silence between them, and then, to Chad's surprise, Ava spoke again, softer this time. "But don't think for a second that I'll forget what you did. I'll never let you forget." She turned, walking away without another word. Chad stood there, watching her disappear down the hallway, his chest heavy with a mixture of shame and confusion. The house was dark, except for the dim light spilling from the crack beneath the office door. Chad stood outside, his fingers hovering over the doorknob, his thoughts a tangled mess of guilt and fear. He had made a promise to his father to handle this, to fix the situation with Vincent Moretti. But it felt impossible. Every time he tried to take a step forward, he found himself sinking deeper into a mess he didn't know how to clean up. He entered the office without knocking. William Lawson didn't look up from his desk as Chad stepped inside. The older man's fingers remained poised over the papers in front of him. "I did what you asked," Chad said, his voice quiet, almost unsure. "I went to Moretti." I apologized. William's eyes flicked up to meet his son's, but his face remained impassive. "And?" Chad hesitated. "And I don't think it's enough. I don't think it'll ever be enough." "Then you don't understand how the world works, Chad," his father replied, his voice cold. "Apologies don't change anything. They only buy you time. You should know that by now." Chad swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" William finally looked up, his eyes hard, calculating. "I'm saying you need to be ready for what comes next. Vincent Moretti doesn't forgive, and neither do I." Chad's heart dropped. "What are you going to do?" William's gaze was steely. "I'm going to make sure that when this is over, Vincent and his family know exactly where they stand. You've crossed a line, Chad, and I don't plan on letting it slide." The city was a beast that never slept, but tonight it held its breath. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on, an unspoken storm brewing in the heart of the streets. The Lawsons and the Morettis had been circling each other for years, both knowing that one day the blood feud would reach its breaking point. And now that day had come. Vincent Moretti sat in his study, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand, the amber liquid untouched. He stared at the city skyline through the large windows, his mind already ahead of the night's events. This war wasn't just business. It was personal. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Ava, his daughter, stepped inside. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a fire that burned with unspoken rage. "They're making their move," she said, her voice steady. Vincent exhaled slowly, setting his glass down with deliberate care. "Good," he murmured. "Then we finish this." He stood, adjusting his suit. The weight of his past decisions pressed down on him, but he wore it well. He had built his empire with blood and iron, and he wasn't about to let it crumble now. He turned to Ava, his gaze firm. "Stay close, and whatever happens, don't hesitate." She nodded, her hands tightening into fists. She had been raised in this world, raised to survive. Across town, in the heart of the Lawson estate, Robert Lawson sat in his war room. The large table in front of him was covered in blueprints, maps, and a series of red X's marking the Moretti's key locations. His men stood around him, waiting for his orders. "We hit them hard. We hit them fast," Robert said, his voice a growl. "I want Moretti wiped off the map before the sun rises. No loose ends." His men nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They had been waiting for this moment, for the chance to finally end the Morettis once and for all. Chad Lawson, Robert's son, stood near the back of the room, arms crossed. He had grown up under his father's rule, learning that power came from taking what you wanted. And now his father wanted blood. "You sure about this?" Chad asked, his voice laced with doubt. Robert shot him a sharp glance. "You getting soft on me, boy? This is what we've been waiting for. The Morettis don't deserve a second chance." Chad hesitated. He had seen what war did to men. It turned them into ghosts before their time. But he swallowed his uncertainty and nodded. "I'm with you." "Good." Robert turned back to the table. "Let's move." The streets of the city turned into a battlefield as both families moved into position. Engines roared to life, black SUVs rolling out like armored beasts ready to devour anything in their path. Guns were loaded, silencers screwed on, and final words exchanged between men who knew they might not see the sunrise. The first shots rang out near one of Moretti's warehouses. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence, echoing through the night like a warning bell. Vincent stepped out of his car, his men fanning out around him. He took in the chaos unfolding before him, flashes of gunfire, the scent of gasoline and blood mixing in the air. He remained calm, calculating. "Push them back," he ordered, his voice steady. "Make them regret this." Ava moved with precision, her gun steady as she took down a Lawson soldier attempting to flank them. Her heart pounded, but her focus remained sharp. She had been trained for this moment, molded by the violence that surrounded her family. Chad, on the other hand, found himself caught in the storm. He had expected a quick assault, an overwhelming victory. But the Morettis fought like men who had nothing to lose. He ducked behind cover, his breath heavy as bullets whizzed past him. Then, out of the darkness, Vincent Moretti emerged. Before Chad could react, Moretti was on him, disarming him in a swift, practiced movement. Chad barely had time to register the cold steel pressed under his chin. "You think power is just about pulling a trigger?" Vincent's voice was low, calm, almost disappointed. "Your father taught you nothing." Chad swallowed hard, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. He had been raised to believe strength came from dominance, from taking what you wanted. But Moretti had built an empire not just on violence, but on fear, respect, and knowing exactly when not to pull the trigger. Vincent smirked, lowering the gun. "A dead man learns nothing, a broken man he remembers forever." And with that, he let Chad go. Chad stumbled backward, shaken. He had come into this war expecting victory or death, but Vincent Moretti had given him something far worse, a lesson he would never forget. As dawn approached, the battle finally began to wane. The streets were littered with bodies, the scent of gunpowder thick in the air. Sirens wailed in the distance, but both families knew the police wouldn't interfere. Not in a war like this. Ava stood beside her father, blood staining her clothes, but her gaze unwavering. "They'll come again," she said. Vincent nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course they will, but next time they won't have a leader." Robert Lawson was dead. Chad, barely breathing, was left to pick up the pieces. He had lost his father, his men, and his illusions of power in one single night. And now, he was left with only one thought: revenge. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know about your thoughts in the comment section. Also, subscribe the channel for daily stories notification.